Hello, so delighted that a woman that I had the pleasure of hearing nearly 12 years ago has agreed to speak to us today about the wonderful charity that she set up back in 2008 and 9 entitled 500 Miles. 500 Miles can be found at www.500, that's the numbers, 500miles.co.uk. And they provide prosthetics and orthotics for people in Africa to help them when they've had amputation or disability to be able to walk. And of course, the name 500 Miles comes from the famous Proclaimers song about walking 500 miles. Speaking of walking 500 miles, Olivia Giles, I was wondering when you started this walk to set up the charity 500 miles, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Earlier today, you told me that you had the wind at your back and doors flew open, but I'm sure along the way, occasionally there was a challenge or two. Tell us about that, will you please?
At the beginning, there were really not very many challenges, but it is extremely challenging now.
Mhm.
I think that as time has gone on, the service that we provide has very much been taken as just there, and it has become much harder to get cooperation and buy-in from our local staff and from the government. I think it's because it's just difficult putting two quite different cultures and sets
Mhm.
of expectations together for long. And it has worked very well, but I think that we're really getting to the point where it's time to let the grown-up teenager loose
Mhm.
and set it on the road. And I think that the signs of that are just the challenges of continuing to try to keep the two in the same house,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Indeed. So what I'm feeling is that you're a victim of your own success. It's now become successful. You want to maintain the quality to some extent, but it's time to let the teenager walk themselves, to
Yeah.
empower them
Yeah.
to walk. So how do you let go? Tell me how you, as the founder of this, find the spirituality, if you will, to let go.
Well, the whole venture was always about empowerment right from the beginning. The plan was to build the physical centres, to build an in-country workforce, which takes a long time because the qualifications are 3-4 years long,
Hmm.
and to incubate it, get it working, get a quality system in place. But the plan was always to hand it over. It's been there from the beginning as the intention. So it's now just about not treading water and not trying to keep the teenager at home and opening the doors. So it's time.
Yes, it's kind of a natural and normal evolution, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you think about actually letting a teenager go off to university or college, it doesn't mean that you're abandoning them.
No.
You're still going to be there with the financial support, the guidance when it's needed, etc. So that's what's in our sights.
On your website, there's so many fantastic stories of the success that you've achieved in Malawi. And one that I particularly found heartwarming was Samuel Nuyamayo, the farmer, who in a shooting accident, lost his leg, and now with the aid of a prosthetic is able to walk again. Tell me about Samuel and maybe one or two other stories of folk that you've helped in Malawi.
Well, our poster girl, if you like, is actually Susan Banda. You'll find her story there as well. So she was born with withered, deformed legs. She'd never been able to walk, and as a baby it was fine. She was carried, but as she got to school age, she couldn't go to school, and she was occasionally put in ramshackle wheelchairs and tried to be wheeled to school. But that's quite a big ask of siblings who are already walking large distances to get to school themselves. So she really missed out on an education altogether. She was abandoned by the father almost as soon as she was born. Her mother tried to bring her up. But when the father insisted, the child was then moved to live with her grandmother. The grandmother couldn't cope with her, and eventually a couple fostered her and tried to do their best. But by the time she was a teenager, she had no education, she was not getting about, she was crawling to get anywhere, she was fed on the floor with the family animals. The foster parents heard about 500 miles all the way down in a long way. Susan lives at the lakeshore in the north, and so they arranged for her to have her legs amputated, and the withered leg, one leg through the knee, one leg above knee. And our records in Lilongwe show that in June 2011, she was fitted with her first 2 prosthetic legs and that she walked. We don't have any photos from that time, but our second clinic in Mzuzu opened in November, December 2012. Susan Banda was our very first patient. And the reason I know that is that when she heard that we were opening in Mzuzu, she presented herself at the building site and she left a bit of paper with the builders, which was passed on to our first manager when he arrived with her name on it and saying that she wanted to be our first patient. Because the thing about prosthetics is that when you first get a set, your stumps atrophy as they shrink with use. So the legs that Susan was given in 2011 will very quickly have become too big. They'll have been like big Wellington boots and useless to her. And it's, I think, was instinctive to her that she knew she would be able to get up and walk again if she could just get smaller sockets. So she was our first patient, and the website does show you pictures of her standing in the doorway. I saw her in September when I was last in Malawi, and she's now a very, very glamorous young woman. Her foster father has helped her to have a lease of a fashion shop, and she is making dresses for local women on the lakeshore. She wants to get married, but her stepfather says that she can't until she's got her tailoring qualification. So she was telling me about the boyfriend when he was out of the room. But for me, her legs are bits of plastic and metal made with the skill of Malawian people that 500 Miles has trained. But this girl has gone from being somebody who was a burden, fed on the floor with the family animals, to being a young woman with her whole life and everything that anybody could hope for ahead of her.
What a fantastic story. I was wondering, when you go over to Malawi, because of the experience that you had and that you yourself wear prosthetics, how do you find this opens up conversations with the patients, the folk that you're helping?
It doesn't. I'm afraid that I think that the difference, the most obvious difference, is the skin color. And I think that people with disabilities are seeing me first as white and different before they'll notice the common disability. But sometimes when you get over that, there's a connection. But I think that quite genuinely people are surprised to see a white person with disability. Just the assumption that we're all okay.
How interesting, because you would think that that would be a natural bond, but it's a cultural issue first, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
The cultural challenge. When you started this charity, 500 Miles, and you were fortunate right away to enroll the proclaimers to perform at a benefit for you, what do you find having the link to the proclaimers has done in terms of helping to promote the charity in other circles?
Well, the song "I Would Walk 500 Miles" is it's like a second Scottish national anthem.
Yeah.
So
I think it should be our national anthem.
When people learn the name of the charity, the first thing they say, 500 miles, and then as soon as you say, "Have you heard of the song?" they usually have, even in Africa. They've heard of it. So it's a subtle way to say that it's a Scottish charity and that we're about walking. We're about getting people moving. And I've always thought that it's a very aspirational statement. I would walk, even although the song's a love song. And I think that the association with Craig and Charlie has done us no harm at all. Occasionally as well, it has been a good hint to people for how much money they should give us.
Good. So let me ask you this. On your website, you talk about one of the major goals of 500 miles is all who need this training and this equipment will have it. What happens once you've achieved that goal? You've talked about handing it over. What happens next?
For the initiative?
Yes, and for Olivia Giles, because this has been such a life-changing experience for you to go from being a solicitor lawyer to the leader of a charity.
For the services themselves, they will be independent of 500 miles. The two clinics are built in the grounds of the main tertiary care orthopaedic hospitals, which they're linked to. So they will become independent and part of the Malawian National Health Service. And I hope that they will carry on. And basically our handover period is about supporting and teaching, so that anything that we're still doing will get gradually passed over. For me, I think that there's still going to be quite a fundraising burden for a number of years to keep the clinics afloat. But there was never a succession plan for 500 miles. It was always build it, incubate it, hand it over. So I suspect I might just have a quiet retirement.
Yes, have a ease up for a little bit, huh?
I think it's about 10 years away anyway before I could really hang up my boots.
Right, and that'll be a 20-year journey. Well, speaking of all who need will have, we want you to have all the support you could possibly benefit from. And so I want to remind our viewers and listeners that the website is www.500, that's the numerals, 500miles.co.uk. Earlier today, when I interviewed you, you spoke to us about that you really didn't focus so much on faith or have a faith as you did an internal spirituality that has kind of pushed you forward. When you look back, fast forward now to 20 years of having set this up and seen it thrive and handing it over, what will you be most proud of when you look back at that? What will stir your spirit internally?
To think of people having a second chance. I've seen the joy in people's faces when they stand up and look at you at eye level for the first time when they never thought they would again. And every time I see it, I remember what it was like for myself. Because until I actually did, I didn't really fully believe that I would walk. You know, people were telling me and showing me, and I had the legs, and you know, you would practice bearing your weight, but until you actually take your first independent step, it's quite hard to believe that it is actually going to work out for you. I know what it was like for me. I have seen it. I've seen the joy in other people's eyes. So I think that that's the thing that makes me happy, is just thinking that there are all these people who've had that second chance that I got, that I was handed on a plate.
Well, as we conclude, let me share with you one other person who had a second choice that you may not, second chance that you may not be aware of. 2 years after I first heard you speak at the Edinburgh lectures, I was diagnosed with a serious back problem and had to have major surgery to reconstruct my back. And as you do, when I awoke from my sleep, felt sorry for myself. And when I was encouraged by the physios to walk, I grumbled. And then I closed my eyes and I remembered a woman named Dr. Olivia Giles. And I began to walk again. And I've never looked back. I keep walking and walk every day. And I'm sure that I'm not alone. There are thousands and thousands of people just like me, not only the 14,000 in Africa, but throughout the world who've been inspired by your wonderful story. So, on behalf of the Edinburgh Interfaith Association, thank you for sharing this story. And I encourage all of our viewers to support your charity, as I will, and I know many others will, at www.500miles.co.uk. Olivia, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.